From its headwaters in Lewis County, the Chehalis River flows 115 miles in a general sweeping curve on its way to Grays Harbor. Along the way, it is joined by numerous outstanding fish-bearing tributaries, including the Skookumchuck, Black, Cloqualum, Satup, Wynoochee, Wishkah, and Hokum rivers. Nearby Johns River on the south and Humtulips on the north flow directly into the harbor. Grays Harbor and its river systems create one of the best fish and crab-producing regions of the state. Unlike sturgeon, steelhead, and other species, mature Pacific salmon crossing the bar between West Barton Ocean shores into Grays Harbor are nearing the end of their life cycle. All these salmon will expire shortly. The only question is, will they expire in a commercial net, on the end of a sport fishing pole, or some distance up one of the tributaries of the hatchery or spawning ground where their life cycle began years earlier? The Quinault Indian Nation, or QIN as it's known, and the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife co-manage the fisheries in Grays Harbor and the Chehalis Basin. Agreement is reached each year between the two on the estimates of returning fish in each salmon species. Then escapement is determined based on the number of salmon needed to return to the hatchery or spawning grounds to ensure survival of that species. By subtracting the number of fish reserved for escapement from the number predicted to return, a determination is reached on how many fish of each species will be available for harvesting that year. In accordance with the treaty negotiated in 1855 on the banks of the Chehalis in what is now Cosmopolis, the QIN has a legal right to catch half the available harvest in Grays Harbor and its tributaries. Each year, based on the available harvest, a QIN net schedule or season is adopted for tribal fishing in Humtulips River and Grays Harbor, and then another schedule for the Chehalis River. Under a special permit issued by the NIT, tribal fishers use drift nets in deeper waters and set nets in shallows. While the drift nets stay in deeper water at the lower end of the river near Aberdeen and Hokum, the set nets are commonly found upstream far as Friends Landing, just west of Montesano. Under the terms of the permit issued by the QIN, the tribal fisher is required to sell the catch in excess of personal needs to the tribal fish station located near the Wishkah Bridge in Aberdeen. Upon arrival, the fish are offloaded and sorted by species, iced down, and prepared for shipping to customers locally and throughout the country. Internationally, salmon egg caviar from Grays Harbor and the Chehalis are highly sought after by consumers in Hawaii and far away as Japan. Using a controversial stakeholder and public input process called North of Falcon, or NOF as is commonly known, Fish and Wildlife then sets the season for the non-tribal harvest. The department effectively divides the remaining half of the available harvest between commercial and recreational fishing interests. Similar to the schedules used for tribal fisheries, Fish and Wildlife sets two separate schedules for the non-treaty commercial fishers, or NT nets as they are commonly known. One schedule sets fishing days in the harbor, and another schedule sets the season in the Chehalis River. NT gill netters are forbid from using set nets and rely exclusively on drift nets in the deeper channel of the lower portion of the river. In a 4-mile stretch from the river's mouth near Hokum to the bend in the river at the east end of Aberdeen, the NT net fishers will often place up to 19 nets in a row. With the net stretching nearly shore to shore, the scene reminds one of rows of hurdles set up at a track meet. A gauntlet is created by the nets that is challenging for even the wiliest of salmon. The non-treaty net fishers typically sell their catch to commercial fish buyers. Often the fish buyer is mobile and meets the boats coming in at the 28th Street boat ramp in Hokum with a large truck. The fish are placed into large plastic totes and iced down to keep them cold on their way to the processing plant. Keeping with its common theme, Fish and Wildlife sets a season for sports fishers in the harbor, or bay as it's commonly called. Then yet another season is established for river sports fishing upstream from the bridge in Aberdeen on Highway 101 going to Westport. During a season, the department will often impose different rules on types of sport fishing tackle that can be used, establish which day of the week fishing is allowed, and identify the species that can be retained when caught by a pole. These rules will often vary between streams or even within a stream, depending on the stretch of the river one is fishing. The experienced sports fisher will monitor the net schedules posted on the Fish and Wildlife website very carefully. A gauntlet of nets in the river all too often translate to few, if any, fish in the boats upstream. Fishing on a day when the nets are in the river is often reported as, well, I went on a nice boat ride.